Welcome to the Perfectly Pieced digital version project video. Perfectly Pieced digital for the month of May 2025 is a cute little bird. It comes with 4 projects. Today we're going to be working on the 8-inch project. This is the first of 3 videos I'm going to put together. I'll be doing 1 project for each block size. There's an 8-inch, a 6-inch, and a 4-inch. Today we're going to make the 8-inch block project for the May 2025 Perfectly Pieced. I have the digital edition here. I'll be using all my own fabrics and thread colors. I printed out the 8-inch block project instructions, single block with quilting instructions, the Plant 13 file, and the branch borders. I don't think I'll be using the Plant 13 file, but you do get this with your digital edition. This is a background quilting. This project does have borders, so I will be working with the branch border file. These are all my fabrics and my threads. I'm going to have a red bird, purple bird, blue bird, and yellow bird. I have 2 different neutral background prints. I picked all my thread colors. My fabric has been starched with this heavy finish by Faultless. The instructions say fusible backing is optional. I'm not going to use the fusible backing. These solid colors, they came from a solid Fat Quarter Club collection I was in where you got a package per month, and they're really heavily starched because I made a regular quilt out of them. And these little fabric squares have also been starched. These print squares, I think I got them on Amazon, and I think you can probably still get them on Amazon probably 5 years ago. I just looked for charm pack squares. My background fabrics came from this September 2023 low volume Fat Quarter bundle. This was from Fat Quarter Shop. They do these monthly clubs, and sometimes they put the bundles on sale. It might be a year or 2 later, but when they go on sale for a good price, I like to get them. You can take a screenshot in case you end up liking my fabrics. These are the particular fabrics I used. I put a little sticky note in the corner. I've also cut all of my batting. I cut the squares at 9 inches since this is an 8-inch block project. So I have 4 of these squares since we're making 4 birds. Page 2 of the project does give you a cutting diagram and the specifics and cutting instructions. One thing that I missed is on page 1, right here at the bottom, it tells you to cut the border strips 1 to 2 inches longer if quilting them in the hoop. I didn't do that because I didn't see that. It's on the first page. I went right to the second page. I'll have to be really careful with my border fabrics when I'm placing them to do the quilting in the hoop. I have a 9.5 by 14 inch hoop. This is the hoop that I have that the machine likes for this project. Hand tighten, screwdriver tighten. I've loaded the light mesh cutaway stabilizer. We'll be following the single block with quilting instructions. These instructions go step by step with pictures. I'll be doing this for the video so you can watch it on the screen, but if you like to have a printout, go ahead and print out that document. I'm on a baby lock meridian. I need to bring up my files. They're on USB. I have them in my Perfectly Pieced bird block folder, and we're working on the 8-inch today. You'll see there's 2 options for the 8-inch block. The one I'm going to work with is this one right here. It already has a little bit of quilting on it. I'm going to use that one for the pillow. If you want to use that leaf quilting file or a different background quilting, you can select this bird block. This is the only thing I need. I'm going to go ahead and hit set and then embroidery. All the colors are going to be different. I've picked different colors for each of my birds. The first thing we're going to stitch is the batting placement line. Grab your square of batting. I cut mine at 9 inches square. Center it over that placement line. Make sure it's covered so everything will get caught with the tack down line. Go ahead and stitch the batting tack down line. Grab your scissors. Trim everything outside that tack down line. Once your batting is trimmed, our next step is to stitch the piecing template. Once the piecing template is stitched, we're going to start working with the fabric for our bird body. The bird I'm going to film today is red. I'm going to change to a red thread. We need piece 1 of our fabric. We've got 2 cuts of the color for the bird body, A3 and A1. So piece 1 is the A1, which is the 3 3/4 by 6, so the smaller, squattier. Grab that piece of fabric. Have this little diagram handy. This is going to be helpful. These are the sections of the bird. We need to place our piece 1 fabric right side up, completely centered over section 1. You can see section 1 right here, this part of the bird, the part that has the eye on it. Here's my fabric. Here's my section 1. I need to place it right side up. I'm working with a solid, so it doesn't really matter. Looks the same on both sides. I want it to completely cover that section 1, just like that. We're going to stitch a line right here. It's the trimming and placement line. Stitch that out, and then you're going to get rid of any fabric on that side, the upper side of the line. My little placement line ran 2 stitches past my fabric, but when I look at it, I am completely covering this section, so if that happens to you, don't worry about it. We want to trim and get rid of this piece of fabric here. We're going to need a piece 2 fabric here. That's a background fabric. You can look at your chart here. See how these have a number 2? So find your background fabric that's 2 1/4 by 4, and I'm stitching bird A. That's why it says A2. That's the piece I need. My piece 2 fabric is a print, so it does have a right side and a wrong side. I need to place my piece 2 fabric right side down, centered along that stitch line. Here's my stitch line. Here's my piece 2 fabric, centering it, and then I'm going to flip it right side down. Make sure again it's centered. I want it right along that stitch line. Make sure it's right side down. Now this piece of fabric, this is an art gallery fabric. They're very slick. I can feel this sliding. So I'm going to center this, and I'm going to go ahead and add a little tape to hold it in place. Right side down, and now we're going to stitch the seam. The seam line is stitched. I'm going to take my tape off, flip your fabric. If you're using an iron to press this, take this off, go to the ironing board. Don't use your iron over here. I'm going to use this little clover seam roller. Make sure it's nice and flat. I'm going to put this back in, and we're going to stitch the next line. You're going to stitch a trimming and placement line. You've got that line stitched. Trim off any of this extra fabric that's on this side of the placement line. If you've got your instructions, we're right here. We just trimmed. Now we need the piece 3 fabric is what it calls it. If you go back to your little birdie diagram, here's piece 3. This is the other part of the bird body. Here it is on that cutting diagram. So the longer and skinnier one, grab that fabric. You want to take that piece of fabric. If you've got a right side, make sure it's right side down. We're going to center it along that line we just stitched out. Then we want to stitch the seam. Once that seam has stitched, go ahead and flip and press. Remember to take it off your machine. If you're using an iron, don't iron on your machine and melt the bed of your machine. Once you have that pressed, we're going to stitch out another trimming and placement line. Go ahead and trim this excess fabric. One thing to watch out for as you trim, especially if you have a dark bird body and a light background, look behind your background. Here's some red thread, some red fuzzies. I want to get those off so when the block is done, I don't find little red threads behind the background. We need our piece 4 fabric, so that's your background, that's 2 by 3. You can ignore these numbers here. These numbers were because I'm using 2 different backgrounds, so instead of cutting 4, or I had to cut 2 of each, instead of 8, 4 of each. That's what the pencil numbers are for. So we're looking for piece 4, 2 by 3. Grab your piece 4, right side down, centered along that stitch line. Once you have it centered, you're going to go ahead and stitch the seam. I am going to tape mine again. Once that seam is pressed, same thing as before. We're going to be doing the same series of steps over and over with all of our little pieces of fabric. Fold it back, iron it, roll it, press it. We have another trimming and placement line. Trim off the extra fabric, lint roll if you need to. Get all those dark threads out from where your light colored background is going to be. Grab your piece 5 fabric. It was the same as this one that we just used. You had made 2 cuts of that for each block. Go ahead and center that, and then we'll stitch the seam. Once that seam is stitched, do the same thing you did before. Go ahead, flip it, press it, and then we're going to stitch the next trimming and placement line. Trim your excess fabric, lint roll, grab piece 6. That is the 3 1/2 by 5 3/4. Right side down, center it along that line, and then stitch the seam. Once that seam has stitched, you want to go ahead and flip and press, and then we're going to stitch the next trimming and placement line. You need to trim all this fabric. One thing I've noticed, the trim line on this red piece underneath here and underneath here has extended beyond this line where we're going to stitch the seam. We're going to put a background fabric on that and then flip it. I'm a little concerned this might show through because it's such a dark red and this fabric is really thin. I'm going to take some time, and I think there's like 2 stitches here and 1 stitch here, and just pop those couple stitches and trim this little bit of red off so it doesn't show through on my background. That's about as good as I could get it because these are the tack down stitches. I will probably see a little bit of this red. I did not put fusible on the back of this background. I figured as I stitched and I flipped, you wouldn't see it, but I do think I will end up probably seeing a little bit of a shadow of the bird through the background, and I'm okay with that. This is a pillow for me. Grab your piece 7, it's the 2.5 by 5, line it up just like before, centered along that line, and then we'll stitch the seam. Go ahead and flip and press and stitch your next trimming and placement line. We're going to want to trim all this fabric. Same thing happened here that happened over on the side with those couple of pieces. I have a couple that are sticking up. I'll see what I can get off, if I can trim some of this out of the way, and then I'll put down my next piece of fabric. That's about as good as I can get it. I'm going to go ahead and leave it. If you're stitching the bird and you've got a thinner background fabric like I have, definitely put the fusible on the back. It'll help with this type of issue. You need piece number 8. It's 2 3/4 by 9. Center it along that line and then stitch your seam. Once that's stitched out, double check for any fuzzies underneath, flip it, press it, and then stitch the next trimming and placement line. Go ahead and trim this fabric. I can already tell I'm going to have the same thing. There's going to be a little bit of red there and a little bit here because you can see the stitching goes further than this stitch line. So that means that this is tacked down past where I'm going to trim. So I'll trim it as best I can, and then we'll grab our next piece of fabric. Grab your fabric piece 9. It's the 3.5 by 9 inch size. Lay it like that because remember we're going to flip it and press it. So lay that down. I have mine taped. I'm going to stitch that seam. Go ahead and flip and press this, and then we're going to stitch the trimming line. The trimming line is a square that's going to go around the whole block. So after I flip and press this with my roller, I'm probably going to tape some of these loose edges. I want to make sure that as my machine goes around, it doesn't catch on anything. Once everything is taped down, we're going to go ahead and stitch out the trimming line. We're all the way on step 49. We're going to be working on the bird wing. I have a printed fabric. I'm going to go ahead and keep my red thread on my machine. I'll go ahead and move through step 49, 50, 51, and 52. You're going to stitch your placement line. Place your wing fabric right side up. The tack down line will stitch, and then you're going to trim. We just stitched out the decorative outline on our wing. We're on number 54. In the instructions, it does call for a thread change. I'm going to leave the red, and for each bird that I'm doing, each bird has its own color. I'm going to stick with the color of the bird for this step, but when I stitch out this background quilting detail, I am going to change to a neutral color to match the background, and then I've picked out an orange color for the beak and the feet, and a very, very dark gray to do the eye. Let's go ahead and stitch the bird quilting details in red. The red stitched outside the bird body. I'm thinking as I'm taking this off and on the machine, I might have stretched or moved it. I'm going to switch to the neutral thread color and stitch the background quilting, and then I'll switch to an orange and I'll do the beak and the feet, and then I have this dark color for the eye. I'll go ahead and do all the stitch out to music. We're all stitched out. Let's get a look at a couple of things. I have this line right here. I'm going to bring that in really close. Do you see how that red thread stitched beyond the side of the bird right here? That's part of the quilting. I can't help but wonder if, as I'm pulling this on and off the machine and maneuvering around the tripod, if I shifted it. And let's look at the beak. My beak did not line up perfectly, but it's pretty dang close. It's lined up down here at the bottom. I've got about a thread's width right here I'm wondering again, they're not right next to each other, but I've got a little space here and a little space here if it's something I did while I was stitching it. Let's take a close-up look at all of our birds, and then we'll trim them to the 8.5-inch size, which is 8-inch finished, using the orange pop ruler. Here's the one we did on camera together. This is the red bird. I went ahead and I picked out that line. This is a tack down stitch right here. I have to leave that, or this stitching here might pop out. So let's look at the beak. It's really close. Touches down here, not so much up there. When it's in my pillow, you're not going to see it. Let's go to the next bird I did. I made a yellow bird. The yellow bird came out really well, probably the best of all the birds. This one, it looks like the beak is spot on. There's the tiniest bit of space, but because the bird's yellow and the background is pale, I don't think you notice it. Here's my bluebird. I had a couple problems with the bluebird. I was also taking pictures of this one as I was stitching it. I didn't quite get this edge tacked down here. It'll be fine. It's right along this line. We're going to stitch this into something. I'm not worried about it. Here, again, doesn't quite match. I do have a little thread. My bobbin ran out while I was stitching the beak. I also had a problem right up here in the corner. I think you can probably see the tiniest bit of batting peeking through. I actually had a whole little triangle for some reason. I don't know if I didn't align my fabric right, but I ended up with an open space. So I cut a small piece of fabric, folded the edges under, and stuck it down with some seam-align glue. And then after everything was stitched, I put a little fray check on it to hold it into place. Unless you get really close, you won't see it. Let's look at Purple Bird. Purple Bird came out pretty good. Purple Bird also had the same problem here, but it managed just to make it. What I'm thinking, since I had that problem with this background and not this background, I think I must have cut those pieces a little bit short. Here's the beak again, close, not perfect. If that bothers you, and again, that could be because I didn't press the seam with an iron. I used that little seam roller, so I kind of squish the seam versus pushing it over and pressing it down with the iron. That might be why. This doesn't bother me. You're not going to see it. If you've got a big gap and it bothers you, I would say just hand stitch a couple of back stitches in there. Let's cut these with our orange pop ruler. You want to use the one for 8.5 inches. It's the biggest in the square set. You can use your lines on the outside, the trimming lines, to help you line up your ruler. You want to get it as centered as you can. When you use the orange pop rulers, you cut on this side. You want to take your blade, put it right here, push so you're all the way at the edge. You don't want to be loose, you want to push it all the way over, and then go ahead and cut. And try to keep it in place as you turn if you're using the rotating cutting mat. And then go all the way around, trim your block. I've got all my bird blocks trimmed. The next thing we're going to do is work on our borders. I already have my fabric cut and my batting cut and a thread color. This is off my thread wall. I have a variety of brands. I printed out the branch border handout that helps you decide what you need for your borders, and I went through and looked at my sizing. If you remember in the beginning I talked about how I cut my borders. I cut according to this cutting guide in the instructions. You were supposed to cut a little bit extra right here on the bottom of page 1, but I didn't see that, so mine are cut exactly to size. We'll see what happens. In this file on page 2, there's a chart to look at, and it goes over your fabric cut width, batting size, finish width, the file name, and the embroidery field. We're using a fabric cut width 1.5 to 2 for these. These do finish at 1 inch. They're cut at 1.5. So you already know you're going to be working with this part of the chart. Which file you pick is going to depend on the length of your border and the size of your hoop. My hoop is a 9.5 by 14. The borders, there's 2 of them that are 16.5 inches long and 2 that are 18.5 inches long. Got a great picture here. We know we're not using any of these 2-inch width. We're using the 1-inch width. I need to get to 16.5 and 18.5. The best I came up with is using this 1 by 10 twice. It'll be 20 inches long, so it'll stitch over. Load your light mesh cutaway, hand tighten and screwdriver tighten. We're going to go load our files, and when we start the stitch out for our borders, we're going to start right here on page 6, and that's from the branch border file. We're going to load our files, and we're going to try something new today. Let's pull up our files. Mine are on USB. I have my instructions right here next to me. Perfectly pieced bird block, that's where I have mine. And I want the border branch file. I'm going to try the 1 by 10. I'm going to bring that up and go ahead and hit the set button. I'm using a really big hoop. This is a skinny, skinny, skinny little file. I'm going to hit my edit button. The first thing I want to do is shift it over a little bit. We're going to squeeze more of these strips into one hooping. It says -2.4. Going to hit OK. I have this little button right here, the one with all the little squares. I'm going to press that button, and you can see it has different choices here. We're going to be duplicating our file. I need to duplicate it going this way across the screen. I'm going to make that selection. You can see this one here has a plus. I need 3 more. 1, 2, 3. Now you've got all 4 of your borders on the screen, but they're really crunched together. You want a little space. You have 2 buttons down here. This one shows arrows pushing, out to each side, and this one shows them getting closer. We want to create some space. Do you see that they shifted? I'm just going to push it until it looks like I've made enough space. If I make it too big, it won't fit in the hoop. That looks like enough space. I'm going to hit the OK button. I'm going to hit my embroidery button. And then if you look at the top of my screen, let me move the camera, right at the top, I can see the embroidery field. 9.45 by 7.21, that's in inches. The 9.45 is your length, see the little arrow next to it, and the 7.21 is the width. My hoop is 9.5 wide and 14.5 long. It'll fit. You can also look at the little picture, and it tells me out of all the hoop choices I have to use the largest hoop. You can look here and see how everything repeats. This is going to happen 4 times. This is going to happen 4 times. I can actually hit the plus minus at the bottom, and I'll advance it. Watch the crosshair, it'll move. Now it's over there. Now it's over there. So what's displayed here in the box doesn't change, but you can see the crosshair is moving. So everything is going to happen 4 times. I want to make sure to back all the way out right there. My crosshair is the center. This is ready to go. I'm going to hit OK, and I'm going to save this just in case. I have a memory button. I'll just put it on the machine. The first thing that's going to happen, you can see this line right here, is a batting placement line. You want to stitch this on your stabilizer. Mine's going to stitch it 4 times. Let's talk about our batting. I cut batting scraps. I have 2 long and 2 short. The outside ones will be fine because you can slide them over, but I need to make sure that the 2 inner pieces will fit. What I'm going to do is take 1 long and 1 short. It's a little tight. I can definitely trim some off of this before the tack down. That way they'll fit on the machine without any worries. I've trimmed my strips. Now everything will fit a little bit easier for the tack down. Lay each strip down, and the bottom of it's down here. I've got a piece of tape on the top of each, and 1 on this side and 1 on this side. Let's stitch our batting tack down lines. All of my tack down lines have stitched. Now we need to trim. Here's what that looks like after all my strips are trimmed. The next thing we're going to do is stitch the border fabric placement line. Once those are all stitched out, you need 2 tape rolls for each strip. But this piece can go right there, and this I would go below that stitch line. I have my 2 long strips of batting on this side and my 2 shorter strips. Here's my first fabric strip, and if you remember, the instructions say on page 1 to add extra length to it, which I didn't do because I followed the cutting diagram. I didn't see the little note on page 1. Since my strips may not be long enough, I'm going to actually pull the tape rolls off. I'm going to tape my fabric up near the top because I didn't give it that extra bit of length to my strip, and I don't want to be short on my quilting. So if you've cut the extra length, you can extend beyond, push it on that little roll of tape, and then you'll line up on those placement lines. Once you have all your strips taped, it's going to stitch the fabric basting line. It says this stitch will be sewn into the seam. It's stitched this side first, so then the fabric would kind of tilt, and then it sort of mounds over the batting. So on all of my strips, this side is really, really close to the edge of the fabric. If you're watching this before you do your pillow project, I would just add another 1/4 inch to the width of this strip and then just make sure I center it over those fabric lines. We're going to do our quilting next. Everything's quilted. We're going to be taking this off our machine. I have everything out of the hoop. The instructions say trim the excess stabilizer, but don't trim the fabric or the batting. I'm going to use a ruler and line up and trim everything and be really precise with that and be careful to make sure that I'm not trimming my fabric. I'm only trimming the stabilizer. Here's everything trimmed. I'm guessing I may need to trim this. We'll see. Go ahead and get rid of your little, goodness gracious, they really stick. Get rid of your tape circles here. Okay, here's the verdict. Guess where I went? YouTube. Get rid of this extra batting. We're going to start with a new batting strip, and you place down a strip just like before and trim it. So when you're cutting your batting for your borders, if you cut a big long strip, after the first hooping, we need to get rid of this because on the second hooping, we're going to place this down just like we did the first time. We're going to follow the exact same procedure. I'm going to go ahead and trim off these batting pieces. I have all my border pieces on a flat surface. We're looking at step number 3. It says to place the completed border on a flat surface. Fold the border right sides together with the batting tack down line on the fold. Right there. Right sides together. You're pretty much folding the part that's quilted over the part that's not quilted. Go ahead and fold those, and we're going to set those aside for the moment. Once those are all folded and set aside, we're going to go back to our machine with our embroidery hoop with your stabilizer, stitch your batting placement line, take your now appropriately sized pieces of project batting, place them down, stitch the tack down, and then trim the excess. And then we'll be adding rolled tape again to each side. I'll do all these steps to music because they're exactly the same. And then we'll pick up here on step number 10 and talk about lining up for our next hooping for our borders. We've got all of our batting placed, trimmed, and we have our fabric placement lines set. You want to get your roll of tape, put them up here, and it does show a roll of tape, top and bottom, but we're on the end. We're not going to be advancing again. I'll probably just tape my fabric down. We're on step 10 if you have your printout in front of you. It says to align your border fabric fold. Remember we folded these on the table with the top edge of the batting. Align side edges exactly with the placement line. The extra fabric will hang off the bottom of the hoop. So we're going to line this stitch line up with the stitch line placement line at the top here. So once you've got everything lined up here, and you have all of these little stitch lines to look at, flip this up, and you want that over the rolled tape, just like that. Press it on the rolled tape, and then it says to smooth it down, and you would have a roll of tape here. I don't, because I didn't cut my fabric longer. Everything is taped and smoothed. Go ahead and stitch your fabric basting line. Here's a problem with my setup. Because the fabric strip is shorter, when it stitches this line, it's going to go like this, and it's going to catch that. I need to cover all of my fabric strips, make sure that that side here is covered, because this side's going to come down, it'll be fine. But here, it's going to turn around and stitch up. All of the placement lines are stitched. Let me show you this. You see how the fabric didn't even get caught on part of this strip? I think, again, if you're getting ready to do this project and you haven't cut your fabric yet, cut these a little bit wider. You'll be able to line up these other stitch lines, and when you do your first quilting, just make sure your center of your strip runs down the center. Let's stitch out our quilting. All of the borders are stitched. I'm going to do just like before, trim away all of this excess stabilizer. Don't forget to pull these forward and get your little tape rolls out of the way. Let's look at the lineup for my birds for my pillow. Here's how I'm going to sew my birds together. I have two backgrounds. So I've got like the lattice, I'll call it a lattice, herringbone, and then herringbone lattice. That's how I chose the direction and my layout for these. I'm going to sew these two together, 1/4 inch seam, and then I'll press it open. These two together, 1/4 inch seam, press it open, and then I'll stitch these together all the way across here and I'll press it open. The reason I'm pressing open is because there's a lot of bulk. There's fabric and stabilizer, and you already have your batting in there. I'll do that, and then I'll come back and we'll talk about attaching borders. I have all my birds sewn together. If you go to your instructions for this project, it has us sewing the short sides on first. Let's look at my short borders. I'm going to put it right sides together. I didn't make this long enough as it quilted. The quilting process kind of brings things together a little bit. So my border, it's just a little short. It's not going to reach. What I'm going to do with my pillow top, I'm going to trim about 1/4 inch off all the way around. And then my borders should fit. Everything's trimmed. I'm going to line it up at the top because I did 1/4 inch on each side, so that gave me a 1/2 inch to work with. Yay! Now I don't have to pick out any of this tape. Now what this does for the project is, instead of being 18 inches by cutting 1/4 inch off all the way around, mine's going to finish at 17.5 inches square. I have an 18 inch pillow form. If it's your first pillow, here's a little secret. Sometimes I like to get a pillow form that's bigger than the pillow anyway. So if I make an 18 inch pillow, especially if it's not quilted, I'll buy a 20 inch pillow form and it makes it extra poofy. So I have no worries about this fitting. I've got my borders sewn on even at the top and long on the bottom. I'm going to trim the bottom pieces and then we'll lay out the top and the bottom. Here's my top border on both sides. I'll be cutting off that little piece of tape. I don't have to worry about that. I'm going to trim that, press it, and then we'll make our back. Everything's trimmed. The ends all match up. It's pressed. Let's measure our project. So right now I'm at 17.5, which is what I expected because I cut off that extra 1/4 inch on each side. I may only need 1 fat quarter for my back. When you do an envelope back, it needs a slight overlap in the middle. You can see that my bird pillow is completely covered. If I pull this, I've got space here. That's about 3 inches, and I've got space here. I can work with 1 fat quarter for this. Folding it in half, and then I'm going to cut it right there on that crease. Go ahead and cut that. You have the 2 pieces of fabric. What you want to do is fold this under along the edge you just cut. It doesn't have to be a big fold. What we're going to do is fold it, press it, and top stitch it. So you'll do that to both sides. So fold it, fold that raw edge under, take it to your ironing board, press it, and then run a straight stitch over it. Here's my bird pillow top. Lay them with the right sides down, touching your birds. What I'm looking at here is I'm checking my overlap. Oh, this is fine. If I match up this edge with the edge of the pillow, in fact, I have enough extra here. If you didn't trim your pillow, I have probably 1/2 or 3/4 inches on either side. You can probably back your pillow if it's 18 inches with a fat quarter, as long as it's a full fat quarter, not a short fat quarter. See how far this goes? It covers more than half, which is fine. You're going to want an overlap for your envelope back. So looking at that, there's the selvage right there. I can cut that off. See this overlap? That's great. That's what you want for an envelope back. How I'm going to do this is I'm going to trim that selvage off. That'll be my point of attachment there. And then this edge with the pinking I'll sew on here. And I'm going to sew those 2 first. And then I'll trim my extra off across the top. And I'll trim the extra off across the bottom. And I'll sew my top and bottom. This is the pillow form I'm using. Here's what it looks like. It came yesterday, so I opened it yesterday and I had it fluffing in the dryer just to make it extra poofy. I like this brand. They feel like a mix between a polyfill and a memory form. You can see you squish it and it pops back up. They're really nice feeling. Let's look at our envelope back. When I stitched here, I did go back and forth across all the corners. If you want, you can clip your corners, flip your pillow right side out. You want to get your pillow form and slide it in. Go ahead and get your pillow inside your pillowcase. I like to slide in one side first and then sort of squish it and grab the other side. Just squish it. Now it's all in, And then you can fuss with feeling where the corner is and getting it into the corner of your pillow form, or your pillowcase rather. Try to get the corners close to your corners, and then just kind of squish it. If it's doing this, just take a minute, arrange, squish, just work with it. See? Looks good. Let's look at the front. Here's our pillow. It's so cute. I love it. I love the little birds. And looking at it from here, you can see, you really don't see those little things, you know, where the beak doesn't quite line up. I'm going to set it right here on my chair. There's my Baby Lock Meridian. There's the Baby Lock Pathfinder with the broken USB that needs to be fixed. There's the tripod. That's where I sit, where I film all these videos. I hope you've enjoyed making the super cute, perfectly pieced May 2025 8-inch project with me. I'll be making a 6-inch project and a 4-inch project. Please be sure to like and subscribe. I'll be bringing you more perfectly pieced Hoop Studio and Kimberbell projects. Thanks so much, everybody. See you next time.